Stay with us if you can. We want to bring in some others. The Financial Times reporting many Americans already looking for ways to ease the pain at the pump. Use of public transportation is at its highest level in half a century.
And there's a shift to other types of vehicles that people are buying. Much smaller cars, really the only ones that are selling these days. Are high gas prices changing America's driving habits for the better? Our Fox Business panel is back to talk about it. Peter, to you first. It's not helping, but is it long run this for the good of the country?
Well, I'm sure it's going to change people's patterns. But first of all, really quickly, it isn't a bubble in oil. By definition, when the dollar goes down, that increases demand for oil. You can't escape that. And as long as
that's
the dollar
what Phil was
weak,
saying.
Yeah, but it is supply and demand. The demand is coming from
supply and demand on the dollar. That's exactly what we said.
But that's where you get oil prices. But as far as Americans changing their driving habits, it's easier said than done. You got a lot of people now that own SUVs with 6-year financing. They rolled over the negative equity in their trade-in, so they can't even get rid of their SUV. And with the housing bubble, you now have a lot of people who moved an hour or two away from where they work to afford a house, and now they're driving these long distances in their SUVs, and there's nothing they can do. So it's over time it's going to happen, but it's very difficult.
So, Mike, it might be about the dollar that's driving prices right now, but the fact is it's going to change the habits of Americans, these high prices, and that will affect the supply of oil we have, which will have downward pressure on the price.
My office is right next to Goldman Sachs down there on Wall Street. The other day I walked past, and every day there's this line of Lincoln Town cars out front because that's the the car services. Guess what was out there just a couple of days ago? Toyota Priuses. Now here's Goldman Sachs, they could afford to rent stretch Hummers for every single employee. Well, maybe not now with the subprime crisis, but they could at one time. Toyota Priuses lined up in front of Goldman Sachs right out in the front. It was unbelievable. Now, if that's not a sign that things are starting to change, I don't know what is. But you're absolutely right. High prices are going to cause a change in behavior and ultimately. And look, Phil Flynn is right. The fundamentals do not support. You got a $6 million build. I used to trade down there on NYMEX. You get a $6 million build in crude. We're making 110, 111. It's going to collapse at some point. The fundamentals will come back.
It's worth a lot more when you trade.
John,
the dollar. Would you stop with the dollar?
Gentlemen, we have a lot more people on the panel.
Going down.
John Rutledge, are people in this country changing their driving habits, and this is a long-term thing, or is it just short-lived?
Well, I'm in California, Dagan, and out here it's all Priuses all the way down. So yeah, I think so. But the biggest thing you can do is not drive your car. And so staying at home, working at home, telecommuting, and all that is starting to happen. Broadband and optical fiber to the home and office is helping people to do that. But if you want to see one implication of this, look at the Manheim Index, which is the index of used car prices, because high oil prices lower the price at which you can sell a used car when you're strapped for liquidity. That's the best liquidity measure for the consumer, I know. But there are other fundamentals besides the ones we've been talking about. As the world now will return to growth, growth means more copper, more lead, and more oil demand, and that's a long-term thing. It's not something that would be a trading story, but it's something that very long-term says that the U.S. and China and others are heading toward a long-term conflict over energy supplies, and the market's going to get tighter long-term, not looser.
Hold on a second. Let me just bring in Euron here. What happens, for example, if there is a lot of savings of oil, as we've been talking about, a lot of Priuses are sold, people don't drive to work anymore, they work at home, and who knows? Maybe the Fed gets religion and starts to raise rates a little to lower the cost of inflation. Could we end up with another oil glut, which would drive prices way lower?
I think at some point that could happen, people are changing their behavior, but it's only at the margins. I think Peter's right. This is going to take a long time, and it's part of the beauty of the market. People adjust the prices. You know what? All those Californians will sell their Priuses and go back to their SUVs when oil prices come down, if they come down. I think the biggest story is inflation. People are going to have to change their behavior in many ways to adjust to a world in which we might have both a recession and inflation, and that's going to cause real shudders in the U.S. economy.
Phil, do you think that this is going to be a long-lasting thing, though, people driving less? With that MasterCard survey, demand's down 7 weeks in a row, right? Is this just going to disappear even if we get a little bit lower gas prices?
well, you know this. If you've ever studied the history of oil, it's a story of boom and bust from the beginning of time. Since we started with whale oil, since the beginning of the day. Listen, I've been around long enough to know that every bull run has its correction and has its day. And yes, this thing is going to end. You know, the question is when. Is it going to end in 6 months or 6 years?
Hey,
the commodity
Phil,
cycle.
excuse me for interrupting you, but I just got to ask, turn around and tell me what's happening in the pit behind you.
You got it. Right now, S&P 500s, they are down a little bit. They're actually kind of quiet. There's one guy reading a newspaper, so they're fairly sideways right now over there. Down a little bit. You should have been down here the other day, David, when we had that rally going on. Now, you would have heard this. I wouldn't be able to hear you right now.
But it's just wild that you say everything is pretty quiet when, from our perspective, it seems like people are screaming their lungs out down there.
Oh, I'll tell you, this is nothing. These guys are like opera singers. They can fill this place. If my hair starts going this way, then you know something's going on.
Phil Flynn, thanks very much. Thanks, guys. We'll see you in a minute.
People's hair is doing that because they're paying $3.54 for a gallon of gas.
That's right.